record to the cloud. All right. So anyways, today we're going to go over just mindset. I want to hit a mindset because sometimes I think we roll into basically appointments and during the day with challenges to where we were yesterday. Sometimes it's easy to basically let outside influences or basically yesterday's appointments or certain customers really get to us. So understanding kind of the difference between, basically keeping the right mindset and letting yourself get focused on what happened yesterday. I kind of jokingly think about it kind of like golf, right? I was at the driving range, and last Sunday, the last 2 Sundays before last Sunday, I killed it. And then the Sunday before I was hitting all my balls fat, and I was literally looking at, kept looking, and every time I got up to the ball after I kept making mistakes onto it, I kept overthinking about what I was doing. And as I was overthinking, I started making more mistakes, and I started getting in my own melon, right? And it reminded me of that Bull Durham says, "Get out of your head, meat. Get out of your head." And kind of remind me, it's a lot like, sales a lot like sports. So as I sat up there and I started to approach the ball, rather than being confident that I was going to hit a good shot, I started worrying about slicing, or worrying about hooking, or worrying about hitting the ball fat, not basically having as much projection on it. And then what happened, I started creating all kinds of bad habits. I started over swinging. And I started trying to lighten my swing up. And then basically I started to try to adjust my grip. And the next thing you know, that everything goes all to hell, right? And then also, so I went to basically the driving range 2 days ago, and I was trying to make sure my swing was fixed. It's funny, when I went out there and I wasn't thinking about anything, I was stroking the ball well, hitting it far, hitting it for great distance. And then I pulled out my driver, which is what was giving me hell. And normally I hit my driver about 300 yards. And I set the ball up on the tee, but the tee wasn't the right height. And then, there's like a little plastic tee that goes, and the ball was set up too high on one. And then I changed the tee and it was set up too low. So every time I started striking the ball, then it started creating bad habits and I started overthinking it. And I'm like, man, I said, isn't that just like business? Because you got to think of, if you walk into a house and I walk into certain scenarios or situations, it's easy to start comparing that to a similar situation or something that's happened in the past, which allows us to prejudge things, right? And sometimes it's not the appointment or the people itself. Sometimes it's our mindset, right? I know, just like golf, I got the ability to hit great shots. But again, if I'm in my own crawl, my own kitchen, and I'm creating my own mistakes, then that's hard for me to basically make the correct adjustments, because I'm too busy worrying about what I'm going to do or what I don't want to do, that it's forcing me to actually fall into that trap. And it's kind of funny when your mind's clear and you don't know what you don't know. Kind of like when I first went out golfing for the first 2 times, I didn't care because I knew I wasn't going to play good, so I wasn't worried about it. And then I played out of body. I played really well. But when I started worrying about it because I thought I was getting better, it actually forced me to get worse. And I think, again, that's what might happen when we get into streaks or we get into basically areas where we might have a pocket where we might not do too well. We start overthinking it and thinking we're better than this, and this is the situation I'm running into, and this is the problem. So what I always remind people to do is, get back to the basics, right? What's it got to do with giving a massive presentation? The answer is nothing. I was talking to one of the other managers in the other spot, and he, in one of the other locations, he's told me, he goes, I keep telling him, don't focus on anything, just focus on giving the presentation. I'm like, you're 100% right. I said, what happened when he did it? He goes, well, he went out and sold a, one-party rental property because he forced the presentation upon him and didn't just shortcut it. A lot of times what happens is customers tell us, I don't need to hear that. I've already got another estimate. I've seen that before. I don't want the dog and pony show. I don't need to go out with you on inspection. I know what's wrong with my windows. If we buy into that based on windows or doors, then what happens is we're changing our whole presentation, which is the whole reason why our success has been here for so long, right? So rather than moving away from the things that made us successful, we need to tighten back up and find a better way to make it happen. I was talking to a rep yesterday that said he walked into an appointment that literally the guy says, well, I got $1,000 to spend. If you're over $1,000, I'm not going to basically even do anything. So you just waste your freaking time. Right. And most will be like, well, man, there ain't no way we can't even sell a window for $1,000, much less a door. Right. It reminded me of when the industry changed the first time. Right. I was working for Champion, and the $189 companies came out like a gangbuster. And so what the key term was, every homeowner came up, they said, well, if you're not the $189 company, we're not even interested because we're not spending that much money. $189 a window. Again, if you're not that, we're not interested, right? So I had, at first took them for their word, and I literally kept walking away from a lot of business and walking up the door. I said, well, if we're not a $189 company, and I started blaming the people setting the lead. And then I realized that, real quick, people don't know what they don't know. Right? So they think in their mind, because advertising or something's led them to believe that they can get the project done for that amount of money. Right? So my favorite coin saying, which worked 90% of the time I walked into that location, again, 90, that's 9 out of 10. Then I used to always say this, hey, John and Mary, I understand. Basically, it sounds like to me you're looking for the best value for your dollar, right? Is that correct? Well, yeah, you're not wanting to overpay for anything, right? Yeah. So I think that's what we're going to show you today is the best value for your dollar. I said, now can we go ahead and take a look at the project? Then we take a look at the project, and I would make it again feel like a unique situation after I shared that opening statement. The disarming statement is just a way to get you to get through and start your presentation. Because again, the presentation is what sells. Without the presentation, again, we are just throwing prices based off our name and nothing else. So we got to make sure, again, our mindset's right. So again, that little statement they walk into and tell you that somebody just wants it cheap, or we don't know how long we're going to be here, or we don't think this is going to be a fit. You're probably going to be too expensive, or I've got this much money. If you're over that much money, I'm not interested. Don't listen to that. Ignore it, right? Because again, that's a stall or upfront objection, right? In the Sandler process, they call it an ISS, which is what they call an intellectual smokescreen. So we got to make sure we know the difference between a smokescreen and a true objection. Everybody thinks coming into a project they're paying cash until the price is rolled out. Then they realize sometimes the amount of cash they set aside wasn't even a quarter of what the whole project's going to be. It might constitute down to a good initial visit or a good basically initial deposit, or basically give them a deposit and some of the measure payment through there. So again, you can't take people for face value, because this a lot of times is the first time they've done it. Or they might have done windows 10 years ago, which basically is putting you in a position where they're trying to relate and compare you to 10 years ago. So you got to use analogies of things and what stuff cost 10 years ago. And especially the thing that cracks me up, if they bought windows and they lived in there a year and they moved out and they got a great smoking deal on that thing, they never got to see the whole process of what was going to happen to those windows after they left. So that's why if you hear that, rather than get combative or basically start trying to address those issues and challenges right there, you need to fight through that, pocket it, and then let the presentation kill that. Because when you get to talking about difference in vinyl and the other products out there, that's when you can really relate that back to, unfortunately, you lived in your house basically a year, right? If you look right here, industry experts tell you that vinyl in our market's going to last 3 to 6 years. Now, if you'd have lived there 3 to 6 years, you'd have probably had a completely different opinion from what you have now. Wouldn't you agree? So again, we got to let the presentation take place and get it into motion. Because if we don't do the presentation, again, we are missing so many orders because we're trying to literally make their decision or let them make their decision within the first 20 minutes of being inside the house. And that's never going to fare well. That'll kill your closing percentage. It'll kill your attitude. It'll start making you overthink your presentations, right? Secondly, last night I was talking to a different rep that had recorded part of their presentation, and they sent it over to me. And I gave a little bit of a feedback. That basically I thought was a really good piece of feedback, because when I was hearing it, I was like, wow, okay. The content they were giving was good. They were talking about and sounded very educational in the process, talking about building construction, earning credibility, talking about the challenges that are happening, why they're happening. But that rep, which was doing a good job and does a good job every day for us, literally spoke for, I think it was like 3 or 4 minutes without having, with having maybe just one communication, asking one question to the homeowner, right? So sometimes we get into where we get, I'm not going to call it verbal vomit, but we get into where we're trying to make a point. So we talk and elaborate for a long time, right? There should never be a period of time where you're talking for like 5 or 10 minutes without getting these couple little statements that I wrote to this representative, which I think are pretty damn positive. Because our whole deal is we got to keep them involved, and that involvement process keeps evolution moving forward, right? It keeps them interested, right? And 77% of the time that people are involved in the decision, involved in the making, involved in the conversation, it's gonna lead you towards a positive decision. And if 77% of the time we're not asking questions or doing the things to draw them or keep them in, it's a big deal. Sometimes you don't need to stop and then make a question up. It's literally having information like this. I said to the rep, I said, hey, very good content. Only thing is, I heard a little pause. I said, I heard little pause. I said, try to pause a little bit more and ask and pull more yeses, right? So ask questions. Hey, does that make sense? Wouldn't you agree? Basically those type of things right through there make a big difference. So if I'm trying to make a point, here's why we can't do this. Does that make sense? Yes. Would you agree this is the way we need to do that? Yes. So these little things make a big difference, right? Because if we get them on a yes train, which means we're trying to explain something and we're in basically talking about home construction or water management or things, there's a likelihood we could talk for 4 or 5 minutes right here with having little interaction communication, because we're trying to preach to them the gospel, right? And just like if you go to church or you listen to a sermon or you listen to an audio program, man, you got somebody that sits there and talks for an hour and doesn't elicit your response on there, your mind starts going other places, right? So therefore you look like you're paying attention, but you might be thinking about what's the next thing you got to do after this, after these people are explaining this, or you might not fully engage. But if they know a question's coming, they're going to deeply pay attention. So again, make sure we're pulling more yeses. So John and Mary, hey, understandably so, here's why we don't think this would be a good fit into your home. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that? Yes. Why would you agree with that? What does that mean to you? So again, we're getting these little things that make sense, so we're getting to agree to kind of pull that information. Even if your content is spot on, we have to stop and then pull yeses. And if we're not pulling yeses and we're literally just blabbing out a bunch of stuff, even though that content is perfect, if we're not getting them involved in the content we're trying to put forward, we are literally going to be not pulling them towards the cell. We're going to be pushing them away. And if I'm pushing them away because all the content I'm giving, even though it's good, they stop listening. Remember, the human brain can only withstand 20 minutes of information in one setting. And if that 20 minutes of information I give in one conversation, then their fortitude to take anything in, unless they're taking notes, is gone. So I need to basically make sure I break that content and keep them involved so that they continue to keep learning. And if they're learning because they're answering, that's a big difference between blabbing and basically pulling. So again, we're not trying to slap them with information. We want to pull them into the conversation. And the best way to do that is, again, so if I'm talking about the inspection, John and Mary, hey, we look at this window, and we go through our information. How long has that been a problem? What have you done? Try to fix it. How much time, money have you spent? Sounds like to me you've given up trying onto it. Great. So does it make sense on why we can't use a retrofit in here? Yes. So no matter, basically, obviously, based on the condition environment, you'd agree that's not a good situation for your home, right? Yes. So again, we look at the window, we look at the frame. How would you suggest we get that frame out of the house? Well, this, and this. Okay. Yeah, completely. It's a difficult situation, right? So, when we actually have to take that, we cut that frame back out of the opening onto here. There's some things we're worried about. We got to protect the water management system. Does that make sense on why that's important to protect the water management system? Yes. So again, we're educating and pulling them in the conversation, right? If that does, here, let me go ahead and explain to you. I've been doing this for X amount of years. Let me explain to you some of the situations that make this tricky and make this situation difficult when we're going to have to do an installation like this. And then get them involved, right? Does that make sense? Is that something you're willing to sacrifice? Do you understand why we have to do it this way? Do you agree with that? Yeah. So getting all these little yeses and getting yourself to be really good at the yes train is a gigantic eye-opening experience. Because what happens is when you get in a rut, you start overthinking stuff, right? And then we start over-explaining stuff and we stop forgetting to ask questions, which is why we start asking questions and making sure that we basically are pulling this information. If we're not pulling the information, then literally we want to make sure that we are doing everything possible to make all the difference in the world. And if I'm not basically pulling that information, then we want to make sure that we are literally able to pull them into our inspection, right? How do you get somebody to own a commitment? You have to keep them involved through the whole process. If again, I'm not pulling them in, does that make sense? Do you understand? Can you see how that's important to you? Do you know why we do it this way? Does that make sense why we do it this way? Then you're not doing that good of a job communicating. You might memorize all the content. You might know it by heart. You might think more information is going to create a different decision. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you might do everything perfect. You might be missing inflection, okay, which is like a slice. It might be you're forgetting to ask questions to gain clarity to make sure that they understand what's going on. Because if they're not clear, that's like a hook, right? So I want to make sure that at the end of it, they fully understand the difficulty of the situation that's at hand and realize that they can't trust this company to any joke or hack or do-it-yourselfer or basically small fly-by-night company or any little retrofit application, because this is unique. And they waited too long to do certain applications, which is why it's a big deal. Don't go in there and just say, we don't do retrofit. Go in there and explain to them after the inspection process why it's not a good fit for their home. And when you explain why it's not a good fit for their home and we just don't do that, when you explain, here's why we won't do that on your house, because this, and this, does that make sense on why we're sharing that with you? You know, put the level down on the track, figure out the ways that in the inspection, the cracks and the stucco, whatever it might be, and make sure they want to do it right. So again, you're not just checking the box. So, you know, kind of short, but it's very powerful and effective if you do it correctly. Because if we're asking those questions and we're pulling it out and making sure basically we do those little things that pull us in and not push us out, that's gigantic. So again, what I ask you in your presentation, how many questions are you asking? Are you clarifying they understand what you're sharing? Are you asking, does that make sense enough? Are you getting the yes train, or are you just blabbing content? Remember, content is king, advertising is queen, and she runs the household. Means that you're designed with your presentation to pull them in. If you're not pulling them into your presentation and they're just sitting as an outside spectator, just like watching TV, hearing you blab for an hour and a half to 2 hours, that's not a good situation to moving forward. You're not public speaking here, you're teaching and educating. And the biggest deal about teaching and educating is keeping people involved. So if you're not asking the questions and making sure you gain clarity and ask why they feel that's important, or you tell them, does that make sense on why that's important? And asking them to explain to you what you just said, that's the only way you're going to keep their full attention, especially really smart people, you know, or dominants or reds. Because the red people that basically we look at, we want to make sure that we're getting to them as tight as possible. Just like we talked about your reds, basically the ability to take their fingers down if there is a problem, and making sure that basically the challenges that we're doing are pulling out basically these challenges through the inspection, and again, getting them the ability to listen and open up and be real, then we're challenged, right? So you get the red coming in the house again that blocks you up. It tells you, I just want a price. Here's the windows over here. Go measure. If we don't do something to level the playing field or get them off their game, then they're going to go sit back in their office and wait for us to measure all the windows. And now we don't even have an inspection. Now we've gone out and measured all their windows with nothing back in return. And by the time we sit back down at the table, there's no more urgency. There's no more pain. There's no more definition. And literally at that point, we are slinging windows. And in our industry, if you haven't figured it out by now, the window is that much of the presentation. It's that much of the sale. It's a solution, but windows don't get up and install themselves. But putting the right material, the right glass, the right frame, with the right installation inside of there, backed by the right warranty, that's the whole package. And if you're missing one of those areas through there, whether it's weather stripping, whether it's the glass, whether it's the frame, and something's not done correctly, then the window system isn't going to do what you need it to do, no matter who sells it, how much or how little they're selling it for. So we look at this aspect of what we're trying to accomplish. We have to make it simple. And we've got to basically keep working on our trait. So today when you're out there in the field, I want you to make yourself cognizant aware. Are you asking, does that make sense? Can you see how that's a benefit? Do you understand why we need to do it this way? Would you agree, or would you think there's another way to do it? Make sure you're getting them to own into the process and get involved. If they're not owning the commitment and you're just telling them why we need to do it this way and this is how we have to do it, it's okay to do that. But then afterwards, you need to clarify that they agree with you. Because in the back of their mind, they're thinking, nah, this guy's full of shit. Or this girl's full of shit. I don't believe anything they say. Then you didn't do a good enough job involving them in the process and making it feel like it's their decision too. Because part of this whole thing is getting them to own that decision. Taking that slice of life, right? What we're selling, taking that slice of life and making sure we're selling to the problem we create in the inspection, and tying again back the company like we talked about yesterday to the pain and challenge and basically the inspection that we're finding, and then taking the product, installation, weather stripping, the glass pack, and tying that back to why the company and basically the challenge we found back in the inspection are all relevant. Because if we miss any of that, when we go ask for, is there anything besides price or payment why we can't earn your business today? Well, you're the first estimate. Or, you know what, I've got 3 other people coming out. But if you did a really good job, then you know what? We can probably cancel those people if we like everything. Then you know you're on fire. Really, you have no competition. There's 0 people out there that are you that do what you do. You have a process, you have a system, you have all the tools and resources, mostly, that you need. If not, the internet's a crazy thing where you can go out and pull those tools and resources. You saw I just resent you back the keynote where I added the Consumer Reports, basically, number 1 composite window in the industry, right? We swept all awards through that. And you need to talk about, when you talk about Pella, we, not Pella then us. Talk about we, because again, we made a decision to work together as a team to help solve homeowners' challenges inside the house. And remember, we don't sell windows. We sell solutions to people's problems using Pella and Provia replacement products, which is no different than anything we've ever done. So again, when you go out there today, think about it. Number 1, what's your mindset? Are you overthinking? Are you basically focused too much on what you don't want to do rather than just relaxing and letting it come natural through the process? Are you asking enough questions? Are you tying them in? Are you pulling them in? Are you getting your yeses that are allowing you to basically pull out more information, or getting them to lean into the presentation? So if you follow those two things today, just work on those 2 things. Number 1, make sure your mindset walking into that, you're not worried about what mistakes you're going to make. You're just worried about having fun, and then getting them completely involved in the presentation by asking those little trigger question. Does that make sense? Would you agree? Is there anything you would feel we need to do different? Does it make sense on why we have to do it that way? Is there anything else that's concerning to you? No, have we addressed all the reasons why we're out here today, right? Is there anything else you want to share? Do you care if I explain a few more things to you that I'm seeing that might be a problem? Do you understand the dust on the seal? Do you understand where that comes from, right? Explain about that. Does that make sense on how that affects you in your house? Yes. Can you see how that's a problem that needs to be addressed? Yes. So again, take your time, focus in on the things that are important, and make sure we're making the main thing the main thing. So again, you got to clear the 6 inches between your ears first. Make sure you're focused on the task at hand, you're having fun, and you're being the reason why or why not they're going to buy. Then make sure you're asking all of those little commitment questions to get the yes train going so it's easier to get your big commitments. And the more yeses they say through the presentation, the easier and the more logical it is you're going to get the yes at the end. With that said, guys, if you got any questions, bring them. But on that end of it, I'm kind of done talking because I think that's a lot of information in a short period of time to give. Again, but remember, don't overthink and make sure we are getting that yes train going so we know how to and why we're doing it. At the end of it, if you look at them and you can tell the lights are on and they understand it, your whole case you just presented, just like again yesterday, you're creating your case all the way to the end for the lawyer. As you're making your closing statement, you know you didn't leave any evidence on the table. All the evidence you're bringing with you to the end. So when my closing statement goes, there's no question why or why not they're going to do this project. All the dots and I's are, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And then the only way to go, all the doors are shut. There's no way to walk back through the doors. The only way to do is to move forward. So again, with that, if they got any questions, I'll answer. If not, we're gonna end up and let you guys go out and have a great day. Again,
the car.
Awesome. Yep. So LaCar, listen, acknowledge, confirm, and respond, obviously. So again, anybody got anything else?
You were directly talking to me in most of that, so I'm good. Thanks.
All right, perfect. So again, verbal vomit doesn't sell. Stories tell, facts sell. So let's go make sure, facts tell, stories sell. The story's good, but you got to involve them in the story. So remember, ask those questions that are pulling, not slapping, and let's have a great day. Other than that, we have a good start. Setting, basically by the end of the day, we should be over 800 pretty easy. So we're pacing about 1.5 to 1.7 for the month. So again, we put this thing in gear and pop a couple good size orders here. We can be right back up to our $2 million mark. I did talk to Larry this morning, stated the case on, some of the custom pricing and some of the custom window sizes on there, not to mention, basically talking about the difference that financing's made, through this month. So I think, I've made a good case and Kelly's helping us make a case on that financing. So at 36 months and your financing programs, use them like you're never going to see them again. Use them like you're never going to see them again. The urgency, the credibility, everything we put into place right now is going to help our case come the end of the month on why we need to continue to have those plans in our arsenal, because it's going to make our job easier. With that said, guys, have a great day. Love you, and we'll see you on the board.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks, buddy.